what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Let's be heard. Welcome to a special edition of the Mike G in the Morning program from Hollywood, California. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike G, and you're participating in Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters. It's been a crazy few weeks here in the Mike G in the Morning family. And I've got to tell you that I've got faith in us as a community. I've got faith in the Mike G in the Morning family. But I've also got to tell you that we've been lied to. Christians and conservatives have been lied to. Classical liberals have been lied to. And anybody who dares to question the narrative has been lied to. We've been lied to by the mainstream media. We've been lied to by higher education. We've been lied to by the entertainment industry. We've been lied to by elitists of all kinds. Because they want you to think that nobody thinks the way we do. They know what they're doing, and we know what they're doing. Because they figure if they make you feel like it's taboo to think a certain way, they figure if they make you feel guilty for thinking a certain way, they figure if they make you feel like there's something wrong with you for thinking a certain way, that you'll stay silent, that you'll be embarrassed that you dare to question the narrative. That is a lie. It's a bunch of nonsense. And guess what? Now you have a home in the Mike G in the Morning family. We've got a very special guest here with us today on the Mike G in the Morning program, who's back for round 2 of Liberals for Trump. His videos from the Mike G in the Morning program have gone, can I say viral?
I think so.
Is viral fair to say at this point? The original Liberal for Trump, Jonathan Chaffin. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming back. So what's the ride been like now that you've been all over the place?
I don't know. I haven't paid a ton of, I've seen like the views and stuff, but have stayed out of the comments. Have had a couple, like a guy at the farmer's market had seen it. So little things like that. But yeah, I didn't anticipate that it would be seen by so many people.
Millions of views across all platforms.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. A lot of support. A lot of support. Were you surprised by the amount of support?
A little bit, I guess, but I think it also touches on something that a lot of people are feeling in a position a lot of people are in, but can't be public about how they feel.
Why do you think that's true?
Because it's socially, at least in the circles that I run in, it's socially unacceptable to outwardly be a Trump supporter. And by the way, I don't even consider myself a Trump supporter per se. It's just the situation that we find ourselves in, and he happens to be the best option, and the stakes are so high and things are so dire that I'm supporting his campaign publicly. Not that I'm like, it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's a risk socially and personally. And I'm not like I'm not buying like Donald Trump NFTs and like, I'm not into the person. I actually don't like the way that he, his personality and how he presents outwardly. But I think it's absolutely critical that he win this election. I wish it was somebody else, but it's him, and he has to win the next election.
So we've got a bunch of the comments printed out over here, and I want to go through some of them throughout this episode.
Okay.
Now, one of the clips in particular that got almost 1 million views on YouTube had to do with illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. Now, that's a position that you somewhat changed your mind on over the last few years. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think I was actually fairly ignorant about it, and had like a kind of, I don't want to call it a liberal outlook on immigration, but a underdeveloped outlook on immigration.
You said it again. So,
Sorry,
illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration.
That's a pet peeve of mine. And I can tell you that in the clip that got almost 1 million views on YouTube, you called the folks in New York in the NYPD attack migrants. And there were quite a few comments, they're illegal immigrants. Now, had they watched the entire interview, they'd know that we actually spoke about that. They only watched a 30-second clip in order to make that comment. And as a matter of fact, the very next short that was released on our platform was that part of the conversation where we're talking about the distinction between immigration versus illegal immigration.
Yeah.
But there's been a good bit of discussion about this in the news after the president's State of the Union address as well.
Yeah, well, there is one thing that I did comment on actually on that clip, because a friend of mine reached out to me and brought to my attention that the guy who double flipped off the media afterwards actually was cleared and not involved. So I commented and said, just this man was not involved in this.
Right.
So apologies for that, but it doesn't change this incident or how I feel about illegal immigration at all.
That makes sense. And there were, I'm sure, a couple of comments about that. Well, that guy was, oh yeah, sure, let's just have open borders because that guy happened to be innocent.
The cops were still beaten, and
You're kind of missing the point.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to play a little bit of a game today, because this whole illegal immigration thing seems to be taboo, and we'll talk a little bit about what the president said in the State of the Union address. Well, let's talk about that first, as a matter of fact. So he started to talk about Laken Riley. Are you familiar with the story?
Was he talking about Laken Riley or someone else that he mistook her for or couldn't remember her name?
I believe he said Lincoln Riley, who was a football coach.
Yeah.
But Laken Riley,
yes.
I tried to enunciate that when I said it just now. And it's a very sad story.
It's tragic.
Could you tell us a little bit about what happened to your understanding?
To my understanding, this young nursing student in Georgia was murdered by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela.
So that's my understanding as well. And during the State of the Union address, President Biden said, yes, he wasn't illegal. I don't know if you caught that, but he threw that out there, said, yes, he wasn't illegal. And that seemed surprising to me, because the left doesn't seem to want to acknowledge an illegal status any longer. They prefer the term undocumented, but you'd figure with an accused murderer that maybe if the guy did murder somebody, we're not going to be so concerned about the terminology that we use. Maybe we don't have to be so polite to that guy. Well, ultimately, he backtracked on using that term illegal. And after he backtracked on that, the White House, the press secretary, came out and said, no, Biden did not apologize for using the term illegal during State of the Union, White House says. And this is an ABC News article. And what was said was, President Joe Biden absolutely did not apologize for his use of the term illegal during last week's State of the Union address. And this is Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton telling reporters. And Dalton's quote is, I want to be really clear about something. The president absolutely did not apologize. There was no apology anywhere in that conversation. He did not apologize. He used a different word. That's what she said. Now, just to inform anybody who's not up to speed, like we were talking about, he used the term illegal. And I guess this was off script from what I understand. It wasn't part of the speech that was already written out. He went on television, and he did, in fact, apologize. I'm trying to get the quote over here.
This is the apology referring to the gentleman who murdered this nursing student in Georgia.
Exactly.
Which is really what everyone should be worried about.
This is his non-apology over here. He says, I shouldn't have used illegal. It's undocumented, he told Jonathan Capehart. When Capehart asked, so you regret using that word? Biden responded, yes. So just to be clear, here's the exchange. I shouldn't have used illegal. It's undocumented. This is Biden's words. And when asked, so you regret using that word? He responded, yes. So that's after he uses the term illegal. But the deputy press secretary comes out and says that he absolutely did not apologize. Is that lining up to you?
No, of course not. It's a lie.
Does that sound like an apology to you, what he said?
No, but this is just another day, like in this country with this administration. It's like I'm like desensitized to this.
It's similar to what you said in the first conversation that we had about it's 1984, right?
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and they go out there and they tell you something that's completely opposite of the truth, and we know it's opposite of the truth, but they expect us to believe it and go along.
Yeah, inflation is down. Your groceries are cheaper now. Don't you know that?
Did not apologize, absolutely did not apologize. Now, do you think that this is something that people can use in relationships? They just say, I regret using that term, I shouldn't have said it, but you didn't apologize.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is it's preposterous that this is the detail that is focused on, is how he's referred to this person who is accused of murdering an
Right.
American citizen who never should have been here in the first place. That we're, the White House is worried about how this person was referred to.
It's a sad situation, and there are people who are saying that you shouldn't be using this poor girl's death to further some kind of political agenda. And I get that. When people come out and want to talk about gun control in the minutes after there's some kind of a mass killing or anything like that, it does seem sort of disrespectful to the people involved. But it's definitely a conversation that is important in this country when we talk about our borders, when we talk about illegal immigration. And listen, a lot of people will comment that, okay, sure, this illegal immigrant killed somebody. That doesn't mean all of them are bad. And I don't think any of the reasonable people on our side are saying that all of them are bad. There are people out there who are very hardworking, want better lives for their family. We get that. But that doesn't mean that we can just let everybody into the country and not have a border. We can't just allow illegal immigration because there are many good people who are here legally. Can't do it.
Yeah.
There's got to be a line that's drawn somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, there just has to be, no one is, I'm sure most of these people are just seeking a better life, and you can't fault anyone for trying to do that, but a country without a secure border is not a country, and to my mind, we just need a fair policy that people can abide by so that there's a process. People who are being let in are vetted, so like someone like this person who got in are vetted, and the flow of immigration is controlled. Right now we have, I think there are 3 million plus people coming in a year. It seems on purpose. Like I can't think of any other explanation. And also the federal government challenging Texas's right to enforce their own border, fighting so much that this is strategic and on purpose. But as far as like the crime stuff goes, and that this would be like previously the way I would think about this in passing, I would look at this and say, oh, it's a tragedy, but they're using this, and these people are actually people who are against illegal immigration are actually really just kind of racists and mean, kind of nasty right-wing Republicans that don't believe in paying tax at all. And I would just sort of pass it off as such. And I think a lot of people in my kind of circle probably think of it that in that way, or they just totally block it out because it's undeniably a tragedy and 100% avoidable.
I know that you said that you thought that way when you heard Trump talking about the wall on NPR in 2016. Have you ever said that to another person, that the people who are against illegal immigration are racist?
Have I ever said that?
Yeah. Have you ever shared that idea with somebody back then?
Back then? I don't even think it would require being shared. There would just be an understanding among people. Like, if you were a Trump supporter, it was like you totally lost your mind, or you were one of these, you'd been duped. You're like one of these, the way Hillary Clinton refers to people in Middle America, who I now understand are, there's this idea that they're kind of like ignorant rubes that got swept up in this populist wave of Trump and the celebrity of Trump and his rhetoric. And I see this more and more as like this is a class issue. And Trump and it's not even the Republican Party anymore. I call it the MAGA movement or whatever. It's outside of the establishment, and it actually represents the interest of working people in this country. And that's what liberals have gotten away from and abandoned. But I'm so far now outside of those liberal circles. It would just be assumed that everyone shared the same views. And now I'm sort of like, I spend a lot of time alone. Or in my WhatsApp group with my couple of friends that I mentioned before, or just little people here and there in LA that I know that have kind of similar views, or at least kind of open-minded.
The reason I was asking is, had you shared that with anybody, would you regret that? Basically calling people racist who are against illegal immigration.
I don't think it would even like go that far in my mind. It's like I think something that for me was going back to like the neocons in the Iraq War and Bush Jr. That's the idea that liberals have in their mind still of whatever you want to call it, the right. It's not even the Republican Party anymore. But that's the basis. It's like these mean old white guys, mostly from southern states, that are probably racist. That's the basis that everyone is working off of. And it's like, it's just completely outdated. And not only that, the left and the liberals are actually like those people. Liz Cheney is one of those people. And she's like this shining example of Democrats and liberals. She's a neocon. It's absolutely insane that these people don't. And even George Bush Jr. is like this. They have brought him out with Clinton, and he's like this teddy bear now.
Right.
Like I protested the Iraq War. I thought that was like an unjust invasion of a country, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed as a result of that. And felt strongly about like Cheney and Rumsfeld and all of these people. And now that faction, who are like really proponents of the military-industrial complex, are now embraced. They're basically part of the Democratic and like the Democrat Party. It's completely insane.
I guess what I was getting at is to call people racist who are against illegal immigration, or racist because they align with a particular party or certain policies that are not inherently racist. That's a little unfair, wouldn't you say?
It's completely unfair.
Okay.
It's completely unfair. And I've noticed even I went to a couple of protests a few years ago with a lot of those people this time. And more than half of them were minorities, I would say. And during the same time period, this would be like 2019, 2020, I went to the shooting range. More than 50% minorities and small business owners. They're like hardworking people who had bought firearms to protect their businesses and their families, and who are actually, I would venture to guess, are probably Trump supporters now.
And so you believed the lie?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's coming at you from all angles, as I talked about earlier, right?
Yeah, I mean, people still now think that, and this is like one of the hardest things to defend, people think that Donald Trump is like a KKK member. So when I put on my Instagram, not like a big social media person, but I put my Liberals for Trump thing, I know that probably 90% of the people on there are like, oh my God, Jonathan he's lost his mind and supports a racist. And he's become like brainwashed or something. And nothing could be further from the truth. I actually feel that way about them.
So I want to play a little bit of a game.
Okay.
when it comes to illegal immigration. I'm going to tell you a quote, and you have to tell me who said it, okay?
Okay.
Here's quote number one. You can play along at home. If you're watching, you can pause it and type the answers in the comments, see if you got it right. Quote number one: people who enter the United States without our permission are illegal aliens, and illegal aliens should not be treated the same as people who enter the United States legally. Who said that?
Elon Musk.
It's a decent guess. Any other guesses?
Trump.
Chuck Schumer. Chuck E.
Oh,
Cheese Schumer.
Wait a minute. Is there a timeline on these quotes? How far back are we going?
That's quote number one. Quote number two: all Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. Who would have said that?
I'm going to take given the first one, is it Bernie Sanders?
It is President William Jefferson Clinton. Bill Clinton, ladies and gentlemen. So you're 0 for 2. I wonder how many people at home have gotten both correct.
At this day and age, that could really be anyone. If you went back, 15 years.
Okay.
Left or right.
Okay.
Bernie Sanders was like a strong border guy.
Well, maybe we'll get to him. I got one more for you before we talk about Bernie Sanders. Those who enter the country illegally and those who employ them disrespect the rule of law, and they are showing disregard for those who are following the law. We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants of this country.
Is it Biden?
It is President Barack Hussein Obama. Obama. See, you kind of figured where I was going with it after I gave you the answer to the first one. Maybe what I should have done is given you all three and had you guess and then told you who they were. So interesting how much can change over the course of a few years. How these people, was Obama racist when he said that?
Absolutely not.
Was Bill Clinton racist when he said that? Was Chuck Schumer racist when he said that?
It's impossible for a Democrat to be racist.
That is true. That's checkmate right there. Now, last time we talked about illegal immigration, you mentioned that this was a Bernie Sanders talking point. Mm-hmm. You said 10 years ago. It's actually less than 10 years ago. I found an interview from 2015 with Vox. And what he said was, open borders, that's a Koch brothers proposal. That's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States. It would make everybody in America poorer. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state, and I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that. What right-wing people in this country would love is an open border policy. Bring in all kinds of people who work for $2 or $3 an hour. That would be great for them. I don't believe in that. You think we should open the borders and bring in a lot of low-wage workers? Or do you think maybe we should try to get jobs for kids? So I think from a moral responsibility, we've got to work with the rest of the industrialized world to address the problems of international poverty, but you don't do that by making people in this country even poorer. That's Bernie Sanders in 2015, so less than 10 years ago, right along the lines of what you were saying. And I think he raises a lot of interesting points in there. Do you think that, this kind of goes back to what you said. You said that when people think of the right, they think of the George Bush, they think of Dick Cheney, they think of those sorts of people. He's pointing at the Koch brothers. And granted, this is 2015 when he said this, but I don't think that many people on the right associate with those guys at this point in time. Do you?
I don't think so. I think they're probably like Nikki Haley Republicans now.
It's not it's not representative of the types of folks that you will see throwing support behind Trump. Would you say it's fair to say that?
Yeah.
And he brings up the most basic fundamental concept here is if we don't have a border, we don't have a country. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I agree with that statement entirely. And it is the statement, you could just copy and paste that statement to any sort of like MAGA right-wing politician in this country, and it's Bernie Sanders.
I think if you took all of those quotes and you put Trump up there and got some kind of deep fake and he was saying
Sure.
them, the comments on that video would be, "Look at this racist." I wonder if we could actually do that, as a matter of fact.
The question I have is, would Bernie Sanders issue that statement right now in 2024?
Maybe not.
Would he say
right?
that? I don't think so.
Probably not.
And that's the abandonment of the working class, is going from that statement 9 or 10 years ago in 2015,
2015.
worried about low-wage workers coming in, and now falling in line and actually supporting this, which is basically cheap labor for corporations at the expense of working-class Americans.
Now, why do they presume that anybody who's right of center is a rich corporation?
I don't know.
I know Mitt Romney said corporations are people too, right? Or at least associated with a rich corporation. They assume that anybody who's right of center is somehow involved with a rich corporation. Really, today you see a lot of these big corporations promoting leftist values, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the tables have turned again in this strange sort of way since the early 2000s, the Iraq War.
I mean, the corporations supporting, to me, it's all fake. Like the ESG stuff and DEI. Vivek Ramaswamy wrote that book, Woke Inc. And the thesis is, after 2008, with the bailouts, that Wall Street and corporations needed some sort of cover to kind of reinvent themselves or rebrand themselves as caring about people in the world. So now you have, corporations supporting climate hysteria and diversity. But it's not real. Like, none of these people, I don't think any of these people believe in this stuff.
You don't think so? When you see the people at the top for places like Budweiser and Coca-Cola and everything like that, you don't think they're truly on board with that agenda?
No, I think it's just a marketing initiative.
Really?
That went, in the case of Bud Light, went horribly wrong with that ad campaign that they did. But yeah, I think it's completely disingenuous. It's just whatever is required at the time to sell products.
I think another thing that goes unnoticed, though, is the people here illegally, how terrible things can be for them sometimes. Talking about making $2 or $3 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really nothing they can do about it in those situations, right? I've got a friend who, his wife overstayed a visa many years ago, and she was here unlawfully, and she was being treated horribly by her employer, working all kinds of hours, not being paid many times, and not being paid much of anything when she was paid. And that is not a suitable position for people to be living in. And of course, shame on the people who are employing folks under those conditions and everything like that unlawfully, as Bernie Sanders talked about in 2015. That's wrong. But I don't think that gets noticed by people who are chastising those who are coming out against illegal immigration. That this is not setting people up to be in a good position.
No. It's a giant human trafficking operation run by drug cartels. It's not safe. It's not humane. It's a nightmare. People are getting, women are getting sexually assaulted, children getting separated from their parents or being dropped over fences, and then, as you say, if you're undocumented, then you're at the will of somebody else. You don't really have any rights except for if you want to get a firearm.
Oh, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Don't jump the gun, so to speak.
But the idea that you just mentioned, absolutely, you're like an indentured servant to a degree. You're off the books and don't have rights. So this isn't good for anyone. And then on the other side of it, you have highly educated and skilled people from around the world that are dying to come here and work, and that American companies would love to employ to increase, the kind of capacity here, and talent and skill pool. And those people have to wait like years to get visas and to go through this rigorous vetting process just for doing this legally. But then, you have this other, if you do it illegally, you can just like come across the border. So if there were a policy for all of this that maybe fast-tracked, people actually going through a process and being vetted, there just has to, there's also seemingly this idea, I thought this way before also, maybe 10 years ago, that the border is just, this is like an unsolvable crisis. It's just like open and doesn't deserve a ton of thought, and there aren't that many people coming in, and it's not, we don't have to worry about like terrorists or security. But it is a solvable issue. It just requires good policy and politicians to be like adults, and put something in place.
And of course, you're going to get tons of comments that the Republicans killed the bipartisan border bill that included the foreign aid and everything like that.
Yeah, so
But it's again, it's a presumption that the Republicans, quote unquote, are Mitch McConnell, right?
Yeah.
Who,
to me, I mean, the Republicans, what I think Mitch McConnell is like a joke. But the idea that a bill needs to be passed to secure a border, we have the laws on the books. We don't need to put foreign aid in a bill in order to secure a border for this country. It's completely insane and so out of touch that this would be a negotiable, the idea that this is a negotiable thing. It's not. There's no need for a new bill, like an immigration reduction act that sends money to Ukraine and does 3 or 4 other things that have nothing to do with securing the border.
it seems that there are people on the right in the class that you're talking about who are fed up with foreign wars in general,
Mm-hmm.
right, without getting into particular policy, but just as a broad principle, the same folks who were warmongers in the early 2000s, right, because that's how the Republican Party was viewed back then, are now very much against war. They're sick and tired of war. Have you noticed that shift?
Like Tucker Carl, like who are you referring? Like Tucker Carlson?
It's a great example, yeah.
And
It's just
some
the
of them
average
are,
person, no?
Yeah, I think there's war fatigue, and certainly with the economic situation here, the idea that we're sending money to a foreign land and inflation is so high, it just makes this much less palatable for the population. But yeah, there's much less of an appetite for far-flung wars, unless you are a Liz Cheney Republican.
Back then,
Who is viewed, by the way, as among liberals, as like a person of conscience,
right.
which is like completely insane to me that Liz Cheney is like a hero who lost her primary by 39 points or something, and actually cares. Her whole thing with the January 6th committee and being an anti-Trumper is just it's complete, it's just opportunism.
So I want to go back to when we were talking about the unintended consequences of illegal immigration, the impact it has on people directly, even the folks who are here illegally getting trapped in these situations. It reminds me of a situation where you got this long line of cars, lights red for a long time, turns green, a couple of cars go through maybe, and then there's somebody who's got to make a turn across the traffic. Light turns green, and somebody who's sitting there lets the guy come across because he figures that he's not going to have that opportunity. Well, he thinks he's doing the nice thing by letting this person cut across. But he's not realizing that he's affecting everybody on the line behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all kinds of people who are inconvenienced. You don't know what that person's going through. The person behind you could now miss his kid's solo at the play, or somebody could be at the hospital they're trying to get over to. And I feel like a lot of people on the left sometimes do have pure intentions, think they're doing something positive by letting that person go, and they don't realize all the people in the line behind them that they're negatively affecting. Do you think that happens
Absolutely.
sometimes?
I also should say, I think most of this comes from a virtuous place, like a decent, caring place, but it's an emotional place. And it's detached from policy and reality and solutions. But I don't think there's like it's not from an evil place. There's a new movement now that I think does come from like a narcissistic, nasty, actually evil place. And I'm referring to ignorant college students and young people in this country.
So the liberals
it's
of
like
yesteryear were pure intention, but perhaps misguided on certain
Yeah,
policies.
and I think now we have like a narcissistic nastiness that uses issues and supposed virtue as like a hammer to hit people over the head with, but it comes from a nasty place.
So I want to talk about this other issue that you briefly brought up too soon. You had sent me the article. Tell me your understanding of the situation so that way I could talk about it from my perspective after I hear what you got from the headlines.
So I was on Twitter or X and just saw this ruling that a judge ruled that illegal aliens could have firearms in this country. And by the way, I've recently looked into getting my concealed carry, which is going to take at least a year.
Oh, really?
In
Move to
California.
Pennsylvania, bro. 15 minutes, $15.
Yeah. But yeah, I just saw this and it was one of those things that's happened so often in the last few years where you're like, could this be real?
So here's what's going on.
And that's why I texted. I wanted your opinion. So.
Oh, well, you'll get it today. I wanted to save it so that we could share it with the Mike G and the Morning
Great.
family. And the case is United States of America versus Flores. And basically it comes in the context of a criminal case. Person gets caught with a firearm, charged with persons not to possess under 18 U.S.C. 922G. So ultimately, you have certain classes of people who cannot lawfully possess firearms in the United States of America. And it is far more expansive than the mainstream media will have you believe. They'll tell you that anybody can walk into the store and get a gun, and it's no big deal, easy peasy. That's certainly not the case. It would take me hours to talk about all the different reasons why somebody could be prohibited. But one of the reasons is if somebody's in the United States unlawfully. So in the context of this criminal charge, his attorney raises a motion to dismiss in terms of what's called an as-applied challenge. Now, an as-applied challenge, you're not challenging the law on its face. You're not saying this law has to be struck down as a whole as unconstitutional. You're saying, as applied to my client, it would be unconstitutional to prohibit him from possessing firearms. So many times we see this happen in the civil context. Myself and attorney Richard Roberts from my office, we do as-applied challenges in the civil context. He's got several of them going right now. We have one in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals right now that may go up to the Supreme Court of the United States. And he was just in the paper for one of his as-applied challenges in Pennsylvania. And ultimately what you're doing in those civil cases is you're suing the Attorney General, and you're saying that as applied to my client, to prohibit him from possessing firearms, this law would be unconstitutional. This law that prohibits him is unconstitutional as applied to him in his particular situation. So what the judge ruled in this case, there's an as-applied challenge in the criminal context. So they're charging him with this crime, and the attorney raises the argument that you cannot succeed with this conviction because, as applied to him, the law is unconstitutional. Under his particular circumstances, the law is unconstitutional. The court declined to strike it down facially as a whole in this case, but held that, as applied to this particular defendant, the law is unconstitutional. It would be unconstitutional to prohibit this particular defendant based on that law. And we're seeing this in light of the Supreme Court case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. And what happened with that case, we don't have very much jurisprudence from the Supreme Court of the United States regarding the Second Amendment. As a matter of fact, Justice Thomas chastised the rest of the bench for refusing to hear many Second Amendment cases a few years back, calling it the disfavored right. We hear all these cases on Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the First Amendment, and we don't hear them on the Second Amendment. So they got their opportunity with the Bruin case, and Justice Thomas said that the analysis has to be under history, text, and tradition. So basically, when you're looking at these types of laws, when you're looking at regulations that infringe upon somebody's Second Amendment rights, it's got to be looked in the context of history, text, and tradition. Did people in the founding era, or perhaps even the Reconstruction era, did they have that understanding that this is the type of regulation that would be acceptable under the Constitution? So, what the judge did in this case is held that, based upon that standard, it would be unconstitutional to prohibit Mr. Flores, who's an illegal alien. Now, there are all kinds of theories as to why this is happening. And we're seeing this happen in multiple courts because they're not happy with the Bruin decision. They're not happy that the Supreme Court has acknowledged that the Second Amendment is a fundamental right enumerated in our Constitution, and that it's a right that's protected, and the people have a right to own and possess firearms, and protects that right from the government. They don't like that. They wanted all kinds of other interpretations of the Second Amendment. Some were that, National Guard is what they were really talking about, and there's no individual right protected under the Second Amendment. So with Thomas setting forth this analysis and this reasoning, you'll see judges pop up in these different decisions and reach a conclusion that seems like it shocks the conscience. It seems surprising. And the suspicion is that you have these judges saying, you want that to be the standard? Well, if that's the standard, then this. Then this guy who just did 20 years on manslaughter, he can own a gun because of what you said. I'm just applying your reasoning, Justice Thomas. And the suspicion is that they're hoping that the Supreme Court's going to have to ultimately rein this in and say, we didn't mean it. These restrictions are acceptable, and we're going to sort of shrink what we once said. And there's suspicion that's what happened right here. Now, be clear that this is not a facial challenge, so it's not like this judge said the entire law is unconstitutional and you can't prohibit any illegal alien from possessing firearms. They just said in this particular case, as applied to this particular defendant, the prohibition would be unconstitutional. So you see a lot of comments with people saying things like, well, you're going to see all these pro-gun people all of a sudden becoming anti-gun because now, and they'll call them immigrants. They won't call them illegal immigrants. Now immigrants can own guns. You know what I say? Call them on their bluff. Call them on their bluff. The Supreme Court has said that illegal aliens are entitled to Fourth Amendment protections and Fifth Amendment protections and Sixth Amendment protections because they're basic fundamental rights. Do we believe that the Second Amendment is a basic fundamental right? Do we believe that the right to self-defense is a basic human right? It's a God-given right protected by the Constitution, not given by the government that the government can take away. And if we believe that, then everybody's entitled to it. So just like Oprah, you get a gun, and you get a gun, and you get a gun, and you get a gun. Call them on their bluff, because they think that there's going to be some kind of backlash and everybody's going to snap back and say, oh no, we can't have this. Say, why not? Say, go ahead. I truly believe in freedom, and everybody's got the right to protect themselves. And in order to protect yourself, you need the most adequate tools to protect yourself. call them on their bluff. What do you think?
I think the border policy might change pretty quickly after that.
So you think that now that we have this type of decision, in fear that there will be similar decisions,
Yeah.
that people on the
you-
left are going to be fearful that you're going to have armed illegal aliens,
Yeah. that
and
you-
therefore they
it's
want
legal
to.
for a illegal alien to carry or something.
Yeah, well, that's not quite. It doesn't quite go that far, right? It's only to this particular guy. So we see this with the as applied challenges all the time, and this is why as applied challenges are tough, because you'll have one guy win an as applied challenge, and you could have a second guy show up to your office who's got the same exact situation, and guess what? The order in that first case doesn't impact this guy's rights. So you got to go through the process all over
Right.
again. So similarly, in this situation, if somebody were similarly situated, would they have a good chance based on that reasoning if they were in that particular court in front of that particular judge? Sure. Now, it'd be interested to see where this ends up if there's an appeal, because I'd imagine there's going to be an appeal, and this is the trial court level.
And in his case, he argued that it was for his own self-defense, that he was for his own personal security.
Right.
Like that was the,
Yeah, you've got to at least plead that in order for to make your case. I'd suspect in that situation, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about the basic fundamental right to self-defense. But I have had a few people reach out and be up in arms about this and reactionary to it. And, there are suspicions that this is being done for a specific purpose. There was another case where I mentioned that sort of haphazardly about somebody being let out for manslaughter after they did almost 2 decades, I think it was. And the judge said, oh, no, unconstitutional to prohibit this particular person. And I think that we're getting, there are definitely anti-gun judges who are making these decisions to sort of prove a point.
yeah.
And understanding that we'll probably see this, or could see this reined in at some point. They're going to decide one based on domestic restraining orders in the Rahimi case here pretty soon. We'll see what the court says about that. The issue with that one is it could be decided based on procedural due process more than anything, because these restraining orders, they're not the protections in place that you would have in a criminal case. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt in front of a jury or anything like that. So there's going to be all kinds of questions about that as well. So what do you think?
I've clarified. I mean, it's an individual case.
It's never what the
It's
headline
not
says.
it's not like an overarching precedent.
And I could see why some people would disagree, even though it is an individual case, right?
Yeah,
I could see why some people would disagree, but they want you to disagree. The left wants you to disagree.
Of course.
The anti-gunners want you to disagree. They want you, it's bait for you to agree that we should shrink Second Amendment protections.
yeah.
Say no, call them on their bluff.
So an undocumented person can have a firearm, and I can't
Are you opposed to the term
have one
illegal?
in my car.
What's that?
I can't have a gun in my car with the magazine.
So there are all kinds of cases on the criminal side, at least the jurisdictions where I practice in Pennsylvania, where that stuff is also being litigated regarding whether it's unconstitutional under the Bruin standard.
Mm-hmm.
Is there history, text, and tradition for prohibiting somebody from possessing in their vehicle? Now, in the Bruin decision, they do talk about licensing schemes for concealed carry and basically lay out that they're presumptively constitutional. But they really don't address firearms in vehicles, which in Pennsylvania at least, you need a license to carry, to have your firearm concealed or in a vehicle. So you need license or exemption in order to have it concealed or in a vehicle. So while they may have addressed concealed, didn't exactly address in a vehicle. Under the history, text, and tradition, they didn't have cars back then, right?
Yeah,
But were there any restrictions on having arms in your
on horseback.
horseback, stagecoach, or something like that? What were they riding around in back then? I'm not any expert on vehicles or anything like that. But we'll see some of that stuff play out probably. Was that your initial reaction? Is that you, as an American citizen, have all of these restrictions?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that this is an abomination, and just another left-wing insanity.
Yeah. I have heard that from commentators as well, that this person, in Flora's case, is being treated as somebody of the right, and the American citizens are being treated as the others, or at least the gun owners, right? Because
Well,
the people who don't own guns.
This is a real issue that goes far beyond a one-off gun case. If you look at what's happening in New York and actually here in LA to a degree with what illegal immigrants are getting, the services they're getting, versus poor and homeless people who have been in that condition for a long time and are American citizens.
Tell us about that.
Well, just, illegal immigrants getting hotel rooms, for example, in New York City. And then, like, the local homeless population who are American citizens looking at this and feeling obviously pretty angry and abandoned by this.
Was there something about debit cards that I heard?
And debit cards in New York, like just handing out. It actually just incentivizes people to cross the border.
Sure.
But this tension that I'm referring to, you could see it. I don't know if you saw this case last week on the subway in New York. There were shots fired. It's not an exact example, but I think the spirit of it is. It was a black guy and a Hispanic couple. And the black guy was screaming at the Hispanic guy and trying to get him, trying to agitate him, and was actually referring to that incident with the cops getting beaten up. Was saying, like, you think you can beat up the cops? Like, try it on me. The guy was obviously, like, kind of psychotic. And the Hispanic guy eventually got up. He was a little guy, and they squared off to fight, and people, like, cleared out of the subway car. And what wound up happening was the black guy, like, hit him a few times and then had him sort of pinned. But the fight was really over. It didn't seem like that was sort of the end of it, and someone came over to separate them. And the woman stabbed the guy in the back a couple of times. It's hard to even notice, but she stabbed him, and then he pulled out a firearm and, like, squared up to the two of them. Everyone sort of freaked out, and you couldn't see the rest of the incident, but there were shots fired, and it turned out that the gun owner, was shot by his own gun.
Wow.
But I'm just mentioning this because I think that though it's misplaced in this case, and the guy who was yelling at him was obviously, like, psychotic, the tension is real. Because he perceived that these were illegal immigrants, that this is like the atmosphere that we're living in. And another video, I mean, this is like another Twitter video, but also in New York, this Venezuelan gang, like, trying to steal this woman's purse, and she caught the guy. He was on a scooter, and she grabbed him and held him. But there's a lot of crime that's happening and tension in these communities where you have a local homeless community, and then you have immigrants coming in that are new arrivals and non-American citizens that are being given immediate services, like plane tickets. So it's an abandonment, another abandonment of Americans.
And when that stuff on the train happens, nobody wants to get involved now either, right?
No,
One dude
because
who
that
stepped in,
guy who
Brad
stepped
Penny.
in, I forgot his name, who did like an
I
honorable.
want to say Penny. I call him Brad Penny, but that was a
Yeah.
baseball player.
I think his last name is Penny.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did like an honorable thing. I think he's a Marine or something, and intervened and tried to protect a bunch of people. And that is now viewed in our society as like some sort of, everything is just completely upside down.
Wow. So that's a whole lot in terms of the illegal immigration topic.
Yeah. Well, it's not going away, and I think it's on purpose.
Got a lot of mileage out of that one. What I want to do next is, did you look at any of the comments? on
No.
social media. So let's just run through all the different platforms that this has run wild on, right? Starts off on Instagram. One of them's got over 1 million views, 60,000 likes, I think. And others have tens of thousands of views. YouTube, a couple of tens of thousands of views, and one that's got, I think, 800,000 views at this point. All of them have a lot of comments. Interestingly, when you talk about Donald Trump or illegal immigration, people seem to have an opinion. Little did I know that was controversial.
And when that comes from someone like me,
It
it's
just
fairly
turns it up to
unexpected.
11 out of 10, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people had a lot of things to say. I will say that from what I've seen, we had somebody from the program pick out their favorites, and we've got 100 pages of comments over here. This is just the favorites that were provided to us. But 90% of what I've seen is just support, just straight support
Yeah.
for you. And hey, this guy's got a lot of courage for going out there and doing that. Oh, and aside from Instagram and YouTube, apparently there were people who took the video and posted it on their own TikTok and their own Twitter, and those ended up having hundreds of thousands, in some cases over 1 million views on those other platforms. So, interesting. You are a smart man, Trump 2024. Well, you woke up, Trump 2024. And then another interesting one, I have a bumper sticker that says Democrats for Trump.
Oh, cool.
There were quite a few people who said that they were in a similar position. We actually may have one of them on the program pretty soon who reposted it and said that they were of the same view as you. But there were quite a few people who said that they've always leaned left and now they're voting for Trump, which I think it's funny that there are people commenting about that. So many. There are also people commenting that you and I, this is my favorite, you and I are paid actors.
Yeah.
Because nobody could possibly be a liberal for Trump, and that you can't possibly be a real guy, and that can't possibly be your real opinion. So we're paid actors.
If only.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty good. I called up one of my buddies, I was like, hey, I need you to look into this. He's an attorney. He said, it seems that I was supposed to get a check of some kind and I never got paid. I didn't realize that I was a paid actor. But there's quite a few people who came in and said that. And you don't know if these people are bots or that they're being paid to go on there and say that kind of stuff for all we know.
Well, I think it's too far. Like at Gold's Gym, this guy came up to me when I was wearing my Liberals for Trump t-shirt, this older guy, and he was like, could not make sense of it and was really angry and was like, I'm a liberal, like identified himself as such and like took issue with the shirt. So I think there's like this cognitive dissonance and disbelief that those two things could go like in the same sentence. So it's part of this like deranged kind of mental state.
There were other people who said that there's no way that you're actually a liberal. That maybe you're not a paid actor, but you're definitely not a liberal.
I'm a real liberal. Like, I think that term is now like a misnomer for people who are progressives and people who like to control other people. And to me, that's not what a liberal is. I think liberals or whatever have lost their way, and the definition of what a liberal is has lost its way also.
The left seems to be kind of big on that, though, changing definitions, right? Moving goalposts.
Yeah, 100, absolutely.
It seems to be a common theme sometimes. Where has our Republicans been this entire time? They allowed this to happen by doing nothing. You don't have to be elected to do something. Securing the border used to be a Democrat policy. I was a lifelong Democrat that can no longer support that party. It's been taken over by something that my conscience cannot tolerate. Trump 24.
Yeah.
So more people who were in your situation, maybe they're paid actors too, right?
Yeah, it's probably Russian interference or something.
Here's an interesting one. There were a lot of people that I seen who had this sentiment. It's like your parents telling you That's hot. Don't touch it. We tried to tell you. Now you have burnt your hand, and now we all have to pay up for you and your bad choices. Well, in your situation, had they watched the additional videos, they'd know that you didn't vote in the 2016 election and you didn't vote for Biden in 2020, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there were so many people that had they watched some of the other shorts or had they watched the rest of the video, that they wouldn't have commented what they commented.
One of
But
the
it's okay.
things that I didn't mention the last time that I think moved me from being like a liberal sort of changing sides and becoming awake to a lot of this stuff was also reading a Thomas Sowell book called The Quest for Cosmic Justice.
Really?
That is like the only book in the last 15 years that actually brought about like an adjustment in the way that I think about the world. And it was recommended by the same friend of mine on my WhatsApp group, and I think that's when I departed completely, and it sort of changed wouldn't call them, they're not libertarian, but just in the way that I view government changed.
Would you ever identify as right of center?
I don't even know what that I don't even know what that means anymore.
It's a good point.
I just want to be left alone.
Where does sound
where does that
libertarian.
fall on the
But I think that
spectrum?
tends to fall more on the
right.
on the right these days. Yeah. So I think
But if you go too far, where on the right is like neo-Nazism? Where is like this is like this wacky,
I mean
ridiculous like.
yeah, I'm not saying they don't exist, but they act like you go to any right-wing function and they're all just hanging out all over the place.
No, it's a completely
I haven't met 'em.
absurd. It was like the top of the list of the FBI.
Right.
Domestic, these rageful domestic MAGA extremists.
So here's another one that I can't say on the air. Mad effing respect. It's not about hate. It's about love.
Yes.
Another one saying, keeping an open mind can be refreshing. Thank you, sir. Your freedom is a small price to pay for the diversity the refugees bring to America. What do you think of that one?
What was it? Your freedom
is a small price to pay for the diversity the refugees bring to America.
It's just a platitude. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, because we're talking about illegal immigration.
Right, but that's just like an emotional blanket statement that doesn't refer to any kind of law, regulation, policy. I'm not like against diversity.
More supporters. I voted for Obama, Hillary, and Biden. I'm voting for Trump. Another one. Yeah, I had this moment in 2016. Voted for Obama in 2012 as a naive first-time voter. But the way Trump was treated by the entire establishment woke me up. Trump 2024. And then this is an interesting one. Good to know if you can admit they were wrong. Others would rather see their country burned than admit that it was wrong. What do you think about that?
I don't think people are even aware on the left that there's anything wrong.
So you don't think that there's some people like, I don't know, man.
There are some people, like a guy I saw at the farmer's market. I wore my shirt to the farmer's market on purpose just to like gauge response, because it's a very, it's like a Los Angeles Sunday morning farmer's market, and I wanted to gauge if there was any kind of response. This guy was there like with his wife and their baby in the stroller, and he just looked at me and goes, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing." So he's like kind of like shrugging his shoulders and like, I've had enough, and that, yeah. So there are those people, but then there are the other people that are so invested that it's almost impossible for them to look at things objectively. And Trump is like the biggest problem there, because of the figure that he represents to them is so disagreeable that they can't. It's really a tragedy. Like, you can't look at or address any of these issues. That's why I had that T-shirt made, to try and normalize this, so you can have it's not a taboo to have a conversation about this stuff.
Here's more compliments for you, Jonathan. And I can't say this one on the air either, but it says, it takes courage. He used an anatomical reference, but it takes courage to cross the line to do the right thing. I hated Trump when he was elected, but after 3 years of Biden, I could admit I was wrong. Another one, I'm still registered as a Democrat, but I'm voting for Trump.
What is there's no way to know the demographics of.
Well, somebody said in this one over here, I'm Latin and I'm voting for Trump. There were quite a few people saying, and this is on the illegal immigration video, a lot of Hispanics saying that they're
So
voting for Trump.
I think more men would be in this camp that were on the
Okay.
left, and I think less women would be.
Who do you think fewer women who were?
Would depart
Would
and,
depart.
and make this kind of move.
I've seen quite a few who said that. This one woman said that she worked for Obama's campaign and
Oh
she's
my
voting for
God.
Trump in 2024.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if that's in here because there's over 100
I want to know if
pages, but I
she's a
remember seeing
paid
that.
actress.
Yeah, she's a paid actress too. We're all getting paid.
That's a really good one.
It took me like 2.5 years of the nonstop trash talk on Trump for me to start liking him. And more things about, hey, illegals, not immigrants. Immigrants play by the rules. Somebody said, because you used the term migrants, somebody said, as the grandson of migrants, I hate when people use that term to talk about illegal aliens. What do you think about that?
He objected to the use of the word migrants.
Right. When you're talking about illegal aliens.
I don't think illegal alien doesn't sound great, like to be referred to either.
Yeah. Well, no, he's saying that he was saying that his grandparents were legal migrants.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you call illegal aliens the same thing as them, kind of disrespects the people who went through the process lawfully. Does that make
Sure.
sense?
So if we were taking this literally, a migrant would just be a person migrating, and then you would qualify that with illegal or legal. So I should have used
You didn't get
illegal
specific
migrant.
enough.
But migrant per se doesn't go either way.
So then you had the people who came in, I like Trump, I don't like Trump,
Yeah.
having nothing to do with the video, really. It had something to do with the video because the video is liberals for Trump, but they
Yeah.
didn't address anything specific in the video. And when you were talking about how originally you were horrified, this guy says his actions after losing should horrify you. And he went on to be badgered by 349 comments
Oh my God.
to that particular response. Do you have people ask you that question as well?
Oh, that's the first thing out of any. But what about January 6th?
Mm-hmm.
That's like the first go-to, like, yeah, that's like the go-to response. January 6th, Trump's a racist. He's corrupt. He's a criminal.
Here's one right along those lines. This guy says 63 court cases lost, responsible for the horrific response to the pandemic. Butt kissing for Putin. Impeached twice. Asked the defense secretary to send troops to shoot the peaceful protesters by Lafayette Park by the White House.
Yeah. This
This is for real.
This guy's like bought the whole package. Like somebody gave him like a flash drive from the Democrat Party and just like put it in his brain.
Embraces American nationalism and is itching to be a dictator. Not for just one day, as he said, but for every day. He is a danger to this country and to the world. What's with the whole dictator thing?
Well, that sounds like a brave member of the resistance.
Do you have conversations with people who have bought the whole package like that?
Yeah, they just have like emotional meltdowns. And I understand because I felt that way to a degree, but there's so much evidence. Like, I wouldn't even know where to begin with all of the stuff that guy just listed. It's all inaccurate. And by design.
You
And
mean he didn't
say
instruct anybody to shoot anybody?
When I say things like this, I realize also when I'm trying to explain to someone, I sound like I'm nuts. Because I'm like, hold on a second, let me explain January 6th to you. It wasn't a coup or an insurrection. It was a riot. It wasn't good. Against it. The only person who died on that day was an unarmed American citizen who was shot by a police officer. Like, that's the truth. They can't seem to find, though they've imprisoned, like, average Americans who are walking through the Capitol and were let in. Some of them have committed suicide because they were outed. They found all of these people, a girl who touched a table at the Capitol, and they can't seem to find the pipe bomber who was sitting on a bench outside of the Capitol and looking at a camera and is like so obviously, it's like comedic. But if I mention this, someone would immediately point their finger at me and be like, "Oh my God, he's become like a conspiracy theorist." But this is what happens when you have to when you jettison the media, which also sounds nuts. But I had to do that after the Russia thing with Trump. When you realize you can't really, these organizations have abandoned their principles and are just narrative driven, then you have to practically go to source material yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what it
it's
becomes.
Really difficult because there's
it's
only so many
job.
hours in the day,
Yeah.
right? You can't trust anything.
It's like a constant telenovela running in politics. And if you miss a beat, you'll just have the story wrong. It'll be like a misunderstanding.
Have you ever tried to actually look at the specific source for a lot of these things? Just, you type in about the case with the illegal alien and firearms.
You can't find, you have to go down a page of nonsense.
If you could even find
If
it.
you can even find it.
One link brings you to another, and unless you're going and typing in through Pacer or something to find the federal court documents, to just find a copy of it, it's really difficult to just find what they're commenting on.
Yeah. How about the Trump Charlottesville press conference?
That's true.
Can I just see the full press conference, even the full minute, which clearly shows that he did not refer to neo-Nazis as fine people.
Right.
Obviously, just this bloodbath
Bloodbath.
comment thing.
Yeah.
I kind of seized on this because I think it's such a perfect example of how gross these people are, and how people latch onto these things. They don't look at them themselves. They don't see them in context, and they still trust where these things come from. And it also fits a narrative that they'd like to believe about Trump. Like him or not, it's unfair. But yeah, you have to go to source material or maybe the free press, to people's Substacks. There are great independent journalists now that we're in a weird kind of transition from legacy media. And then there are these incredible independent journalists like Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger that are I don't know, there's some kind of benefit in having direct access to these people. Also, they don't work for institutions at all.
So, do you have anything else to say about the bloodbath situation in particular?
Yeah, I got into an argument with my dad about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us.
I thought this was a perfect opportunity to gently, he's a lifelong Democrat, and he thinks the New York Times that he's reading now is the same one from 20 or 30 years ago. He doesn't realize he's reading these little woke propagandists, basically. But anyway, I pointed this out and said, I don't know if you probably are hearing that Trump used the word bloodbath, which is you probably think he called for violence. If he wasn't going to get elected, that there would be violence. And that's actually not the case. And I just want to point this out as a perfect example of what has been happening for the last many years. In all of these cases, he was referring to the auto industry and electric vehicles that China would manufacture in Mexico, and the tariffs, that there would be an economic bloodbath if he wasn't elected. And my dad couldn't, he had to, he commented on it without having seen the video.
Really?
And I just said, how can you comment on something? Why do you have an opinion even? You can just say oh, I haven't seen it, I don't know. But the feeling, and it's not just about my dad, the feelings it's so visceral what Trump represents to people. I so wish it were someone else so that you could just expose all of this stuff. If it were Vivek. And I'm so looking forward to who he chooses as a running mate, because I think it could soften out so many of his rough edges if it were Tulsi Gabbard.
And she gets
for example,
treated unfairly, then
if she's a Marine, and a woman, she's amazing and like a person of integrity. So I hope she would be amazing. And then there would be even more talk about a liberal for Trump.
So if you think that if it's anybody but him, people are going to more readily realize the unfair treatment that's going on, because a lot of people give unfair treatment a pass because it's Trump and they don't like him.
Yeah, I think there would still be bias and unfair treatment, and I think it's so entrenched now and so divided that if Vivek was the nominee, for example, who's the son of immigrants himself, a person of color himself, who has lived out the American dream and started these companies, they would still have to go after him. But he's so eloquent, and he engages with people. He has these climate and trans activists outside of his events. He brings them in and gives them a microphone and lets them speak and engages in dialogue, and then he very kind of kindly disproves them. So how could you argue with that? But because it's Trump, it's like, oh my God, this disgusting, corrupt, the real estate guy at the country club playing golf with the non-disclosure agreements. It's just like this monster, when in fact, you could apply so many of those things to Joe Biden.
Here's another couple of comments along those lines when you're talking about the media. NPR is also what changed my mind on Trump. When he was president, I listened to NPR every morning on my way to work, and for 2 months they talked about how Trump would never sign the bill that was making its way through Congress because it was written by Democrats and because Trump is racist, and what a terrible person he is, even though the bill would be great for Americans. Well, he signed the bill the next day on NPR. The entire show, all they said was what a terrible person Trump is for signing the bill that they wanted signed. In other words, they talked bad about him no matter what he did. Sign it, don't sign it, he's bad either way. That was when I first realized how liberal media treated him. Everything Trump did, they found a way to say he was bad, even when he did what they wanted. Sounds like a similar experience. Another one, as a lifelong Democrat, I will not be voting blue. 1.2 thousand likes, 137 replies on it. And then
I will say this about Trump. He makes it very difficult to vote for him.
Yeah. Which is because of the things that he says.
He's not gracious. And I can see how Bill Maher would never be able to vote for Donald Trump because he feels like they're sort of like he's submitting to Trump in some way. There's a submission to this gross character, and Trump has this kind of bravado about him. Yeah. He does make it he makes it difficult for people to vote for him. Yeah. And I also find moments where I'm like when he talked about Nikki Haley's husband. Yeah. I'm like, that's gross. Her husband is deployed for every one of those. Joe Biden just 2 weeks ago will go out and say that Trump refused to go to Normandy, to the graveyard, and called these people suckers and losers. It's a complete fabrication, but someone someone on the left in the Northeast would be like, can you believe this monster? Of course he would say that.
There are some people who do enjoy Trump's speeches and everything like that, though.
He's funny.
Yeah.
He does a good Biden impersonation. I'm not going to lie. I find him he can be quite funny.
Those Republican primary debates, had you watched any of them in 2016?
One of the funniest things that was the sensation of Trump when he was debating Jeb Bush. And Jeb Bush, in this completely inauthentic, mama's boy way, was who did you admire the most or something was the question. And he was like, my mother. and went on this thing, and Trump just interrupted him and said, "Well, maybe your mother ought to run for president then." It was just like totally emasculated, and it was just hysterically funny.
Yeah, those were some pretty classic television there.
Did you have like another moment that, I mean,
Oh,
there
I
were
could
so
go
many.
on and on. There were a lot of them with Bush. There were so many great ones.
Yeah.
When the lower you go in the polls, the further you get towards the end of the stage. And Jeb, who was the front runner at the beginning, had all this money raised.
Yeah.
And was saying that Donald Trump will never be the nominee and you can't insult your way to the presidency. And then he's over to the edge and Trump was like, yeah, keep it up, Jeb. Pretty soon you'll be off the stage. And he starts, Jeb interrupted him saying something at one point. He said, well, I'm at 43 and you're at 3, so I'm winning.
Well, he's authentic, and people are tired of authentic people.
Nobody ever
like
did
it or
any
not,
of that
he's
stuff
authentic.
before. And then one of the moderators, I think it was Hugh Hewitt, said to him, was talking about on my radio show, people were criticizing you for X, Y, and Z, and Trump's response is, well, nobody listens to your radio show.
Yeah, I like, what happened to having like contempt for politicians?
Yeah.
And like, what happened to that? And the idea that they're public servants.
And I think people
like-
on the right and registered Republicans also, who were fed up with the party, recognized that the establishment Republicans did not want him to win.
No.
And so as a result, that just made them want to support him more. And I think that there was a period where after the 2020 election, there was a possibility that he would, the support would sort of fade a little bit. But it seems that the search warrant and the cases that followed thereafter did nothing but invigorate the support behind him. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Because people have a sense that he's being treated unfairly now. And
He is.
That sort of made everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people who were maybe looking to go in a different direction, maybe a DeSantis or something like that, said, you know what, we're going to roll with Trump if this is what's happening to him.
Yeah. And DeSantis I love DeSantis because he's competent. And by the way, I think of Trump as like a centrist now. His platform is like practically a Democrat.
Yeah.
But DeSantis was kind of like wooden because it is a charisma competition, unfortunately. Trump is just like, he's charismatic.
Just a couple more, and then I'm going to ask Caden, would you be able to pull up that video that I sent you?
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
All right. Here's another one. I'm a liberal for Trump. I left the illiberal Democratic Party in 2018, voting Republican for the president for the first time in 2024. So another person on your side. It seems like there are a lot of people who said that they're in a similar position. So makes it all the more ridiculous that there are people who can't believe that you exist.
Yeah.
So one of the other comments that I wanted to address, whenever Caden's ready to pull that up, why don't you go ahead and play that? That way we can...
It says liberals for Trump. I did not support Trump. When he was elected, I was horrified. I thought that the world would become dangerous and he would run the country into the ground.
At what point did you realize, after being horrified, that this isn't exactly what they said it was going to be?
There was a documentary I saw about the 2016 election and the spying. That dawned on me just as a person who believes in free speech and democracy, that outside of politics or partisanship, that is totally unacceptable and undemocratic. And if we're using the excuse of Trump that this behavior is justified, that democracy should be subverted, then there's a huge problem in this country. And to see people who were so emotionally riled by the figure of Trump to the point that they suspended their belief in democracy and a free and open society in order to remove him is so dangerous.
All right, there it is. That's the one, Marv. And as an aside, what is the name of that documentary?
The Plot Against the President.
And directed by whom?
Amanda Milius.
She may be coming on the program here pretty soon. That would be interesting to sit down with her and discuss the documentary and everything. One of the comments that was repeated was that we are not a democracy, we are a constitutional republic. Can I ask you, at any point in that video, did you say we are a democracy?
No.
So what
I
did you
suppose
mean when you were using the word democracy
As an
in that
overarching term for a society that has free and fair elections.
context? So you're talking about the principles
I know
of
that
democracy.
we live in a constitutional republic, if anyone is wondering.
I don't think that in the way you were using the term democracy had anything to do with pure democracy, direct democracy versus constitutional republic. You're talking about the fact that people vote in this country, right?
Yeah.
'Cause the term democracy means government by the people, essentially what it means. You weren't saying that we are a democracy.
No.
You're talking about... The thing that got me is if you insert the term constitutional republic into every time you said the word democracy, it wouldn't make any sense. This is completely undemocratic.
True. Yeah.
This is completely unconstitutional republic. It wouldn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
So do you think people get hung up and they think the word democracy is somehow tied to the Democrat Party? And that's why they were objecting to you using the term democracy at all in any context?
I don't think the word is, but I think the idea of democracy is, I think people on the left think that is their, that they are the guardians of democracy.
So if you in that video were making claims along the lines of that we are a democracy, and somebody did post something like that in one of the comments that I saw, said Hillary won the popular vote and therefore she really won the election. That I get it when people say, hold on a second, pal. We
Sure.
are not a direct democracy. We're not a pure democracy. We are a constitutional representative republic. That would make sense in that context, right?
Yeah. I was referring to an assault on a process,
Right. That
like
somebody
a democratic process.
somebody was going to be duly elected and they didn't want that to happen, essentially.
Yes. And then afterwards tried to have that person who was fairly elected removed from power.
That makes sense based on what you were saying. But just as an aside, I didn't see anybody get specific in their objection as to why. If somebody said, hey, I know you use the term democracy, but we're a constitutional representative republic, and I know that Sir William Blackstone, in his writings, well respected by the founding fathers, said that constitutional republic is a type of democracy, but I don't think you were quite specific enough. I didn't hear any comments that were fleshed out to that degree
Yeah.
as to what their objection was.
Well, there are a lot of know-it-alls online.
Yeah, I just wish that people would have thought that out a little bit more. Because I get it. Listen, pure democracy, a direct democracy, that's two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner, right?
Yeah.
There are problems with pure democracy, direct democracy. And I think it was Kennedy said that we don't all dress up in togas and go down and vote on every single issue. So that's correct. We're not a pure democracy. We're not a direct democracy. But to say that you can't use the term democracy or democratic like you were talking about to describe our form of government is simply inaccurate. Because when you look at the writings of like Sir William Blackstone, and Sir William Blackstone, if you want to read about the founding fathers and their influence, this is the man who talked about the laws of nature and nature's God. If you believe in our Constitution and you believe in the principles, you really need to go and investigate Sir William Blackstone. But he believed that a constitutional republic referred to it as a form of democracy. So it'd be like saying, oh, no, that's not a car at all. That's a Ford.
I don't know if you know this, Mike, but the Cold War was fought between communist Russia and constitutional republic, the United States.
Well, there are other ways that you could describe it other than a constitutional republic, right? You could call it a constitutional representative republic. That would be accurate. A federal republic.
Yeah, federal
right?
republic.
That would be another way. Representative democracy is a term that's used often in many government writings. So just because you use the term democracy, number one, it doesn't mean you're promoting Democrats. And number two, it doesn't mean that we're not a constitutional republic.
And to bring this full circle, I think the illegal immigration that's occurring now is an assault and a strategy on the when they do the census. It includes all peoples. So it's an attempt by the Democrats to get more seats in the House. So it's an assault on a democratic process, or
The constitutional republic process.
but to say something like that is so preposterous, because why would the Democrats strategize to do something like that? They're nice people. They're above, Machiavellian gaming of political systems. That's like the belief.
Do you hear people suggesting that we should get rid of the Electoral College?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think people say that when their side loses the election.
Okay.
And
And that's it.
When they
Nothing
win
more.
it,
When they win,
it's
doesn't matter.
representative of everybody. It accounts for country folk. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about it much. I know that the popular vote in 2016 went the other way.
The problem is that the federal government's become so powerful. And if there were to be something along the lines of we get rid of the Electoral College, you'd have so many people in this country who don't live in Los Angeles, who don't live in New York, who don't live in Philadelphia, whose lives are essentially going to be run by people in those places voting for policies that simply...
It's basically California. You have the coastal cities,
Right.
San Francisco and LA, and then everyone else in the state. The rest of the state is red from the coast across, but they live under the administration of basically a one-party state now.
And then you'd have people in Oklahoma and people in Kansas and people in Texas,
Same.
even Pennsylvania, which is a swing state. They went Trump 2016 and Biden 2020. But you have those people who would be subjected to the policies purely based on the numbers of cities.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be an issue with how powerful the federal government is. And some people don't seem to understand that. They say, oh, well, convince more people that your policies are better if they're really that great. And it's not about that. It's about not everything is going to work for people everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of the Federation of States.
People are allowed to have a different way of life. And if you get to that point where there are people in these other states that are forced to live a certain way and basically live under the control of people like that, you really don't have a viable country anymore, I don't think.
I already feel that way myself,
Really?
living here.
Because you're
it's
unrepresented in Los
maddening.
Angeles.
Yeah. This is it's run completely against my interests. It's the most controlling state in the country. Everything is regulated down to, and incompetently so, and there's no opposition. So that's how I feel on a pretty much day-to-day basis, but I just love, I love the state naturally, and it's like a hard dichotomy of life.
Have you ever considered moving?
Yeah, I thought about Texas and Florida, But I don't want to live in. I mean, I don't want to live in Florida.
Why is that? Humidity?
No, I just always thought Florida is like kind of. I've spent a lot of time in Miami and stuff, but I don't know, it's just like kind of trashy.
Have you
And,
been to Miami in the last 10 years?
Yeah. Um, and I don't know. There's this weird thing about going west, like manifest destiny. Once you go west, like you can't go back east.
Hmm.
You have to go like to Asia or something. And I love the American West. Like I love Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah.
Would you do Arizona?
Probably not. This is the weird thing about how I culturally fit into Los Angeles previously as a place for my interests, my background, my lifestyle. I fit in that way. And then politically and ideologically, I completely do not and feel like a total disconnected stranger. And it's like it's a weird kind of lonely existence. It's not even a social loneliness. It's like a total isolation, like you're living a different reality from people. So it's like the trade-off of, I don't know, going to Texas and like, do I fit? I probably fit in there politically now, but I don't know about culturally.
We checked out Austin.
I think Austin is like pretty blue and dysfunctional. It's like a
It's too
California city in
It's,
Texas.
I say liberal, that's not what I mean, though. It's too leftist, is maybe a better term.
Yeah. And I like being by the beach here, but I've noticed just from wearing my shirt around town, I've noticed like more and more people coming out of the woodwork than I thought. And part of this is just like not wanting to, I don't know, maybe I'll like meet more people or something, surprisingly.
We're not alone.
But I've already been surprised, like at the supermarket I go to. These two guys were having an argument, like these two friends. And one of them was like, has the same views that I do. And I chatted with him afterwards. And then there was the guy who used to cut my hair on Main Street in Santa Monica, who saw the video and sent me a message. I didn't even know like who it was. And I walked my dog on that street and I went in to chat with him. And he's like, we're talking about this. There was a 6-year-old girl who was assaulted on Main Street in Santa Monica.
Oh, wow.
By a homeless person. And then he assaulted another child on the boardwalk in Venice. So we were talking about all this crime that used to not.
Wasn't there like a naked lady sword fighting on the Venice boardwalk?
Oh, there's like every day there's something. But Santa Monica used to be separate from Venice in that regard because they enforced camping rules on sidewalks. So you wouldn't see a lot of homeless people in Santa Monica, and it's very safe. And Main Street is it's like a New England Main Street in a Pacific town with like little small businesses and stuff. And now you have people like smoking crack on Main Street. So anyway, I went in to say hi to this guy. We were talking about the situation there, and we talked about leaving California. He wasn't going to. And then he lifted up his shirt, and he had a 9mm. He had got his concealed carry, and
Good
he's
for him.
like goes to his job and is strapped.
Good for him. Have you seen that billboard going into Orange County? Because you're
Yeah.
talking about,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm talking about?
Where they actually enforce the law.
Yeah. Crime doesn't pay. We prosecute for shoplifting in Orange
Yeah.
County.
I do have a little bit of hope that Gascon will be outed in the runoff. He's the DA in Los Angeles, who's
Sure.
like one of these awful Soros-funded left-wing.
We got censored when we talked about him one time, so we started calling him Boy George.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Boy George, who can I talk about Boy George? or
Yeah, you
no?
could talk about Boy George. Just
Okay.
Just
Yeah, this is like
call him Boy George.
totally insane. Yeah, he funded all of these DA candidates that are now, some of them are going after Trump. like Alvin Bragg and Letitia James, Gascon here, Kessa Boudin, that guy in San Francisco. And they're just horrible partisan hacks. But he saw like an opportunity there to have where DAs, if they don't enforce the law, then they have an outsized effect on the community. So I'm hopeful that Gascon could get removed by someone who would actually enforce the law here, and there could be some kind of renaissance. People are, you can sense that people are fed. Crime is like a nonpartisan issue, and you can tell that people are fed up.
It is a huge bang for buck when you think about it in terms of a district attorney, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're investing in somebody, you're donating to somebody who you think would vote in accordance with your interests, that's one thing. You've got to get many people to vote that way, many people to agree. In terms of representatives, legislators. But when you talk about a DA, they're responsible for enforcing the law.
Yeah.
And all the powers in their hands.
Yeah, I find it. I went to Skid Row this weekend. Which, have you been down there? It's
I
like
have
the
not.
homeless encampment. It's ground zero in downtown Los Angeles. It's like worse than anything you would see in a developing country.
Sad.
And
Have you seen the videos of Kensington in Philadelphia?
yeah,
It's like that.
it is, and it's spilled over into the rest of downtown LA. And I'm driving through there with my friend, and I was just thinking, like, imagine if you were elected, your ambition was to be mayor of Los Angeles, and you won that position, and you're responsible for this incredible global city, and this is what you have accomplished. Like, this is your legacy. Like, how could you drive through a city and look at it the way it is now and not immediately dive into wanting to fix it? And the same thing goes for the state of California. Like, how does Gavin Newsom, like, imagine that guy, like, going through San Francisco and Los Angeles and seeing, like, how could that not get through to you and not have you think, my God, my legacy is going to be that I have turned, like, the most beautiful state in the country and one of the largest economies in the world into, like, a complete, like, a disgusting, decrepit war zone. Like, that's my legacy. So I can't, this goes back to the thing I said about politicians as public servants. I feel like that's gone out the window, that we have a ruling class that doesn't represent their constituents. They're not our representatives, they rule us. And there's no sense of responsibility. Like, especially with the Democrats, it's like this idea, I feel like the Democrat leadership thinks people are stupid.
Well,
That's like I actually had a T-shirt made that said, "The Democrats think you're an idiot." That's the next one.
the next one.
But I believe that. It's like this, it's incredible. There's like no sense of responsibility whatsoever. That's why Trump will hopefully win the election, because he actually represents people's interests. People feel represented by him, not because of who he is. He actually represents people's interests, not platitudes.
So what do you think it means to be a liberal for Trump?
I think it's almost, there's something like, in a weird way, patriotic about it. Because I am going to vote for Trump because I want to preserve America and the system that we have. And I feel like that's going out the window, and it has nothing to do with Trump the person. Like, I am not a fan of Trump the person. But I think it's a wish to preserve this exceptional system that we have that is, like, right on the precipice. If not, it may already be too late with some of, like, the legal things that are happening that are unprecedented, and there were so many red lines that have been crossed that were kind of taboo before. So I feel like it's almost patriotic. If you want to preserve this, you can vote for Trump. If you want to America to commit suicide like it's doing now, and it is, as is a lot of these Western countries, then another 4 years of Biden or whoever might replace him because he's impaired. Then this is, I think the damage might be irreversible with another 4 years, and that's what drives someone like me, who would be socially diametrically opposed to a personality like Trump, to publicly support him at the risk of my reputation, friendships, career, all of the stuff that can be smeared and damaged by an association. I mean, I think it's a patriotic thing.
Has there been any fallout last couple of weeks?
I don't think so. I think I have 200 and something followers on Instagram, and I have 200 and something less by 2 or 3.
Oh, wow.
I don't know who those people, I don't really care. I didn't look or anything. And I haven't, there hasn't been any direct, nobody's contacted me or anything.
Nobody in person.
The only people who've contacted me have been supportive. And
It's so interesting, though, because there are people online who will do things that they won't do in person.
yeah,
And when Doug from Golds was on the program, he talked about that a little bit, how people will say nasty things on the comments that they would never say in person.
mm-hmm.
And I noticed it to a completely different level these last couple of weeks when I had Beneil Dariush, who's in the records books in the UFC and current number 7 ranked lightweight in the entire world, on the program, and Mark Munoz, who's a retired fighter in the UFC. He was number 3 in the middleweight division. He's a 2-time Division I All-American wrestler, one-time national wrestling champion, NCAA Division I. These are guys who can handle their business, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And the things that people have the audacity to say behind that keyboard to these folks,
Mm-hmm.
because they're talking about Christian or conservative values, is just absolutely mind-blowing. You know that none of these people would say these kinds of things to their face.
Of course.
And they'll get on there and they'll type that kind of thing. So it's really unfortunate.
It is. I had a moment after, I didn't know that the video would get so many views or whatever, and it started getting comments, and my immediate inclination was I'm just going to delete this whole thing, because I don't want any of weirdly, I just don't want any of this in my headspace. So I just stopped looking at them.
Yeah.
But it is nasty how another kind of, it's not a transformation, but there's a nastiness against religious people, I feel like, from the left. And I maybe, I don't know if I partook in it, but I thought it was kind of crazy and conservative and not inclusive, maybe for gay people. But I've had a little bit of a shift in that regard. And I think we talked about this before, but there's definitely a God problem in our society. And that's when actually people go to totalitarianism and authoritarianism, when God leaves society. So I'm a fan of, I'm not really into organized religion, but I think the moral compass and the sense of spirituality and whatever your concept of God is human beings everyone is searching for some kind of answer or divinity.
There's an open-air preacher that I follow who says you'd have to be a fool to follow religion. Follow Jesus Christ. 'Cause organized religion has been responsible from the human beings that have been involved for horrible things
Yeah.
over the course of humankind. But that all stems from people who aren't following Jesus and things that he taught and everything like that. So when you talk about religion, and I used the term religion the last time we had this conversation when I really shouldn't have. I think you knew what I was talking about. But there is sort of a distinction there.
In religion versus...
Following Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when you look at organized religion, men get involved and they mess everything up.
Yeah. But even saying, like, at the risk of even saying Jesus, someone else might have like a different concept of God, looking from the outside, you might think that you're talking about the same thing, ultimately. Or do I have that wrong?
What do you mean?
Like a Muslim would refer to Allah, a Christian, Jesus. So if it's confined, like, can I believe in God without being a follower of Jesus? Or in your mind, is that the same thing?
You're asking me, is Jesus the one true God from my perspective? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or can I believe in God and lead a spiritual life without being a Christian?
Well, as Christians, we believe that followers of Jesus Christ is probably a better way to put it, right? Because we're not talking about that religion in general. Followers of Jesus Christ, what you believe is that no one gets to heaven except through Jesus. And that Jesus came, the Son of God, lived as a human being, and then died for our sins. And without that, we could never go to heaven because everybody's broken God's law. And without that sacrifice, without accepting that sacrifice, we've all broken God's law, and the punishment for that is you don't go to heaven. So as Christians, you do believe there's only one way. And there have been preachers, even famous televangelists, who don't want to say that because they're afraid of losing followers and everything like that. But I think that if you don't stand for something with all your heart like that, then why even do it? If you're saying that your entire life's mission is to tell people about Jesus, but you can't say with conviction that you believe that he's the only way to get to heaven, then what are you even doing? And people say, oh, well, it's all God, like you're talking about. You even have this discussion with, like, the Mormons. You say that both believe in Jesus. But when you look at it, you're really talking about two different things. And it would be like saying, hey, Donald Trump, he's the 4'10" Italian guy with 6 fingers in each hand, right? You'd say, wait a second, no. That's not Donald Trump, right? And that's sort of what it's like when you're talking about different religions referring to God. Yeah, we're all using the same name. We're not talking about the same person.
And how do you feel about atheists? Because I'm just thinking of this because of, like, Christopher Hitchens and Bill Maher. And I think I used to, like, before I got sober, I would consider myself an atheist.
Really?
Or an agnostic.
Really?
And I can see now in, like in Bill Maher, an intolerance for people who are religious and believe in God.
Yeah, I almost feel like he had to have some kind of bad experience with a Christian person to end up like that. I think that's
I think
a
it's
problem.
also I think it's a class. It's also like a class thing.
A superiority.
Yeah, like, oh, I don't need, like, God, that's so, like, low rent to, like, believe in God. I don't need God.
It's possible. I do
I
feel
just
like
see
he's
that
had a
in,
bad experience, though. Because you see the bitterness in some of these people when they talk about it.
I think, I think he actually, I don't know if it was directly with religion, but I think he's, like, been alone for his whole life, and I can see, like, some sort of disconnection. He did this monologue about how great things are now. And it was like a defense of Biden, but he was just talking about generally about technology and other like modernity, basically, that has nothing to do with this administration. But he was like, and it was comedy, but there was also an underlying seriousness to it, which was like, you have porn on your phone, you have 60-inch televisions, weed is legal, like all of these things. And I just imagine this guy just completely actually like disconnected from the real world. So I feel like there's something that I don't know anything about him other than what I've read personally, but I can feel some sort of disconnection there. But I'm curious about like the intolerance on both sides, like intolerance from atheists, which is usually like I think it's like a childish front, kind of. And then there's intolerance by religious people against non-believers, people of other religious denominations. Like if you're an apostate in Islam, like it's punishable by death.
Sure. Sure. What do you mean by intolerance? Obviously, that's an example, right?
Of like just that everyone should have the right. I don't think religion belongs in public institutions, like specific religion, but just the freedom for anyone to pursue, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, basically, whether that involves God or doesn't, but you should not be discriminated on the basis of your belief in God or not.
Yeah. It's government this is the other way around, though, right? The government intrusion on people practicing their beliefs.
Absolutely, this came up during, definitely during the pandemic in Canada.
And the letter of separation between church and state, that's what it was about. Is you won't have to worry about this because there's going to be a wall the government can't intrude on your practice.
Yeah.
And the only thing that concerns me when you talk about intolerance is it seems that having the beliefs and principles that you would have as a Christian are considered intolerant as a whole. And there seems to be a suggestion by some that if you don't change your belief, then you're an intolerant person. And don't get me wrong, I've talked about this on this show a lot. I think that there are a lot of Christians who do Jesus a disservice by going out there and not setting a good example and being outwardly rude to people. You shouldn't be trying to hurt somebody's feelings if you're having a conversation about this stuff. But that doesn't mean that you can't believe in these principles. So, forcing it on somebody you're talking about, you're not a non-believer. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, that means you're going to hell, because that's not going to work out very well, right? That's going to be counterproductive to have that kind of a conversation.
Well, if you're a Jew, you can just say, oh yeah, we don't actually, we're not interested in even converting you or,
Oh, yeah.
There's no conversion. And then in Islam, it's like your mission to convert the world.
Yeah. And with Christians, you certainly want to lead people to Jesus, but there's a fine line between making people aware of the message and trying to force it upon them in a way that's counterproductive. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are people who have bad experiences. I get it. I remember in college, towards the end, I started going to church again and getting involved in everything. And there were guys on the baseball team who said, I used to go to church with my family and everything. It's not for me because I had a bad experience over there, so I'm just not a Christian anymore. And I asked, I was like, you ever drink that one thing? And I don't drink either today, but you ever drink that one thing where you go out, you have a night and it just made you so sick? Yeah, that's tequila. And you had a bad experience, right? Yeah. So you never drank again at all after that, right? And I said, oh, no, of course I do. Just because you had a bad experience at a church or something, or a bad experience with a human being, human beings are not going to be perfect. That doesn't mean that, you throw away the entire belief in Jesus because of something like that. But I think there are so many people who've had bad experiences with Christian people and have turned away completely, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. You even have like the censoring of professional athletes who like praise after, I think, like after the Super Bowl, or that the quarterback for the 49ers is also like a very religious guy.
Right.
They've tried to like censor out some of their comments after games and stuff. It's just
Yeah.
like bonkers.
Yeah.
Like,
I asked Dariush, because he goes out there in his post-fight speeches, and he's all in for Jesus.
mm-hmm.
Turns out he also doesn't like socialism very much. And I would have thought that putting out a clip saying that socialism is not good and things that he said would be as non-controversial as we all love hamburgers. Turns out I was very, very wrong, and there are plenty of people who were very supportive of socialism who were in the comments about that one. Now, you had more people who were supporting what he said, but there were a lot of people coming after him in the name of socialism. But he goes out there, he talks about Jesus unapologetic, and I asked him, when you go out there and say things like that that might not be popular, do you ever give any thought to that? And he said, we keep hearing that this is unpopular, but he doesn't think it's true. He thinks that Christianity in America is still strong. Maybe they're not the loudest. Maybe the critics are louder.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way they always pop up in these comments and everything like that. Maybe they're in certain positions of power where they can have an impact, but he thinks that Christianity is still strong in the United States. Maybe it's sort of like a liberals for Trump situation.
Maybe.
What do you think? It's entirely possible, right?
It's hard. I'm just thinking of my immediate circle, and the real thing is like among young people. And if families participate in religion still. I think a lot of this progressive stuff on the left is total godlessness and like cultish, godless behavior of like believing in woke hierarchies, and a lot of like the call and response stuff. It's like some version of communism or totalitarianism.
We've got a godlessness issue.
We
Well, it
do.
looks like we're going to have to at least have a part 3 of this. This was your 3rd appearance on the
It was,
program.
yeah.
We'll have to have you on again. I feel like you're a part of the program at this point. But it's great to see you again. Thanks so
for
much
having me,
joining
Mike.
us.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
We miss you, Ellie. Daddy loves you.